Hi, I'm Jim Crawford. I was lead guy behind Frog Fractions, and I'm here to tell you about how you can make your game more mysterious and also why you would want to bother. When I started playing video games in the 1980s, everyone I knew played the same games, and when we weren't playing those games, mostly because we were in school at the time, we were talking about them. We would talk about jumping over the flagpole in Super Mario Bros. And finding the chocolate factory level. If you beat Metroid fast enough, Samus would be naked at the end. Not only could you shoot the dog in Duck Hunt, it was the most gruesome thing you'd ever seen, blood, bones, and fur flying everywhere. We all knew that every one of these rumors was crazy, but then there was the rumor that in Super Mario Bros. You could break through the wall at the end of level 1-2 and find an alternate version of the warp zone that took you to a weird looping underwater level. At first we assumed that was crazy too, until the next day, when someone had actually managed to do it and was able to show us. Seeing one of these rumors turn out to be demonstrably true lent credence to all the rest of them. This was the cultural context that every game existed in the 1980s. Playing a video game meant entering an unknowable world operating on confusing rules where anything could happen. This mindset lent an enormous amount of weight and mystery to every video game, with no developer effort whatsoever, and it started before you even put in the cartridge. The ultimate mysterious game is the unplayed game. Nowadays, we're inundated with information about every game long before release, and after release, anything you're still wondering you can look up in a strategy guide, and why wouldn't you? Sure, you could just sit there and wonder, but why would you bother when you can just know? Even if you're cognizant of the long-term pleasure of wondering, it's hard to deny yourself the instantaneous pleasure of finding out right now. This is one of the reasons why adventure games are a niche genre now. They're built entirely around sitting and wondering what you're supposed to be doing, and these days it takes uncommon strength of will to not just look up the answers after you've been stuck for a few minutes. So, in light of this, how do we get the mystery back? Make the player ask questions. H.P. Lovecraft wrote his best works in the immediate wake of relativity and quantum mechanics turning the world of science on its head. Now, he was pretty hit and miss, but when he was on his game, he did an amazing job evoking a world in human terms that is fundamentally beyond human comprehension. You can't describe a world like that. You have to hint at it. And Lovecraft usually did a good job walking the line between leaving the door shut and opening it entirely. The best example of this from Lovecraft's canon is probably The Color Out of Space, which documents the scientific investigation of a meteorite and its effects on the farmland that it crashes into. This talk is going to be full of mysterious media you should consume, so I guess start writing those down. In games especially, questions can be much more mundane than that. What's behind the locked door? What lies beyond those mountains? How do I lower the drawbridge? Hey, I got fireworks that time. How do I do that again? You need to be careful that you don't provide answers that are worse than leaving the question unanswered. Think about how you felt after seeing a magic show versus how you felt after you found out how the trick was done. Magic tricks employ bad secrets by design. This is how they stay secret. If the secret was awesome, then you would get a thrill by telling your friends about it rather than a groan. A bad world-building example from Lovecraft's canon might be the Mound. Maybe don't write that one down. The setup of the Mound is excellent, full of thrilling questions. The guy who went into the cave came back with mirrored internal organs? That's weird. But when the answers start coming in, they're all disappointing. Turns out they have a guy down there whose job it is to reverse your internal organs. Oh. There's an active volcano in the background of Battlezone. You can't go there, it's purely visual flavor. But there was a persistent rumor amongst players that if you drove towards it for long enough, you could leave behind the enemy tanks, drive up the side of the volcano and into the caldera, and explore the castle that you found there. Sometimes it's enough to just add a few lines and dot particles on a vector display to hint at a cool thing, and let the audience fill in the gaps. There's always the temptation to go to the extreme and provide no answers, only questions. But people will see through this. When you watch a show like Lost, which throws out question after question, steadfastly refusing to provide answers to any of them, it feels empty. By the second season, what the writers constructed felt transparently like a facade of a mystery, rather than feeling like an actual mystery. After a while, the audience realizes that they're being played, and that there are no hidden rules to puzzle out. They'll realize it faster with your work than they did with Lost, by the way, because they've already been bitten by that dog once. There is an adage amongst storytellers: show, don't tell. With games, you should go a step further. Don't even show. Let the audience find the answer. Put interesting things in your game. You were going to do that anyway, right? And then don't call attention to them. A cool thing that can be missed makes the world feel more like a real place and less like a clockwork puzzle constructed purely for the benefit of the player. And don't worry about people missing your cool thing, because players will tell each other about what they've found. Lately there's been a big push towards making narrative-driven games finishable by everyone, and if you want to push games towards being a storytelling medium, then yes, every story has to have an ending that feels like the end of a story, rather than a screen that says, "You suck, try again." But that doesn't mean that everybody has to see everything. Historically, games have excluded by definition. They're built around the concept of separating the worthy from the unworthy, locking the best content behind progressively more difficult skill tests. This is why Mass Effect fans were up in arms about the idea of a narrative mode, which allowed you, if you weren't interested in the combat sequences, to skip them, the same way you might skip a cutscene that doesn't interest you. We've spent thousands of hours honing these thumbs, and now you're just going to give the "you win" screen to anybody who puts the disc in the drive? Screw you, buddy. Also, the new XCOM is coming to consoles. Sign my internet petition. Putting content in your game that not everybody sees creates pockets of people who feel like an in-crowd, the seed of a community that feels closer to each other and to the work. And stumbling on an unexpected secret makes the world feel more like a real space and less like a crafted amusement park ride. In the tabletop RPG Legend of the Five Rings, there's a sourcebook called Merchant's Guide to Rokugan. If you open it up, there's a couple pages of Merchant's Guide in there, and then it actually turns out to be the manual for the underground network of agents trying to overthrow the government. Which is a legitimately awesome secret unless you really were interested in role-playing a merchant. Those players hated it. The creator's mistake was trying to lure in a target audience that was even more hardcore and nerdy than the average tabletop player, then yanking the carpet out from under them when they took the bait. It felt mean-spirited. That's why I didn't call this talk Unified Scalable Architectures for Content Addressable Systems. There would definitely be people showing up who were really into content addressable systems, and they would be angry and disappointed. By the way, I looked up the phrase, and content addressable basically just means you can search it. Now, if you take my advice and trust the player, it's very possible to make your work so obscure and arcane that players will give up before finding any of the cool parts. This is why you need an advocate. This is Brandon Sheffield, who was my advocate for Frog Fractions. Nearly all the press I got can be traced back to a couple of tweets Brandon made shortly before I officially released the game. For some reason, when the creator of a work says, "I can't tell you why it's awesome, you just have to trust me," it's a lot less plausible than when somebody who's not the creator says it, even if they're being paid to. Once your advocate has done his job, he can retire, and fan momentum can take over. For many games, the advocate takes the form of a PR department, but traditional PR is a terrible medium for spreading weird secrets. Your advocate does not have to be a person. At the climax of the Nintendo product placement vehicle The Wizard, the eponymous wizard discovered that in Super Mario Bros. 3, you can find a warp whistle by ducking on a white block and slipping into the background. This doesn't ruin the puzzle because it's not really a puzzle at all, it's an Easter egg. That there was this unexpected hidden passageway buried in the mechanics of the game led you to wonder, what else is hiding in there? And if you want to stretch my already shaky metaphor even further, the advocate for the last third of Portal was the first 2/3 of Portal. So another way you can solve this problem is simply by making your game self-evidently awesome. I'll wait. Adam Cadre calls the Portal-style reveal the false ceiling. In the Portal example, Gladys passive-aggressively insulting you registers as a 10 out of 10 on the scale of emotional range, because that's the strongest emotion that the work has exhibited so far. But then, you turn a corner in the plot, and your emotional response literally goes off the chart, because suddenly the stakes are much higher than what you'd calibrated for. I very much had the false ceiling in mind when I built Frog Fractions, and one of its biggest strengths is that it's short enough that you never have time to recalibrate. Mystery works better when you share it, so you want to encourage the community to engage with one another. This can take the form of multiplayer, or something as simple as players asynchronously trading items, but what you ultimately want is for the players to share stories. My favorite way to get the community to engage with one another is to give them puzzles that are too hard to realistically solve on your own. Some examples of this. The Secret World. Most of this game is a grind like every other MMO, but there are some quests labeled investigations, and that word is actually apt. You're puzzling out difficult clues, much more difficult than in traditional adventure or puzzle games, and you're doing real-world research, and it demands enough domain-specific knowledge that it can only be reasonably done as a group. The Stars in Braid. First you have to discover that the secret stars even exist. Then you bring together a community of like-minded geniuses who love solving engineering problems for its own sake. After they solve it, you collect your reward. Demon's Souls and Dark Souls are both tuned to require the player to puzzle out obscure mechanics and to discover obscure exploits, and while you could just read a FAQ, The best way to experience this kind of game is at launch, by being one of the community members doing the discovering. The final puzzle's in Fez. I'm pretty sure that the monolith puzzle was designed to be impossible, barring some future release of information, but the community solved it anyway. Adam. This roguelike was in active development in the late 90s and early 2000s. Since the entire game was constantly being revised, the community never knew whether a plot branch was currently a dead end, or if it was just that nobody knew how to advance. It's notable that Adam is closed source, which makes it one of the only traditional roguelikes to leave the possibility space truly unknown, barring direct investigation of the executable. By the way, you know you've done a good job if people are curious enough to disassemble your binary to investigate the mysteries you've left for them. In NetHack, which is probably the most mysterious open-source game in existence, there is a hallucination mechanic which works by replacing nouns in the game with other nouns, some of which appeared nowhere else in the game. So the kobold stalking you might show up as a dragon, or it might show up as a Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle. I read a Usenet thread in the late 90s in which one player described discovering this mechanic, and other players jumped in with their own experiences, listing the monsters they'd encountered. After about half a dozen posts of one example each, one person cut and pasted the whole list of possible monsters right out of the source code. And poof, the conversation was over. No more discussion. From that poster's perspective, the point of the thread was to find the truth, and he just jumped right to it. This is the opposite of mystery, delineating the absolute definite boundary of what is possible. If people care about your game, this will eventually happen. All your secrets will eventually become known. But very often, you see games jumping right to the definite. Don't give the players an encyclopedia when you can let the community write the encyclopedia. Don't show the players a map when you can let them draw the map. It's common to have players unlock encyclopedia entries or collect map pieces, and this is effective in creating compulsion to collect if that's what you're going for. But even something as simple as giving the players a percentage complete number gives them an absolute sense of where the fun stops. Would Super Mario 64 have been a better game if nobody knew for sure how many stars there were to collect? I don't know, but I do know that it would have been a more mysterious game. Here's a shot of the Skyrim stats screen. I can't think of a more anticlimactic way to reveal that your high fantasy game has robots in it. Here's what they should have done, obviously. If you want players to feel like they're exploring a real space, then you have to let them just exist in the space. Leave questions about where the world ends unanswered or incompletely answered. Leave the edges of the possibility space fuzzy and obscure. There are at least 120 stars. It's worth pointing out specifically that having an abstract visual style is a very powerful way of not answering every question. Text-heavy games and games with pixel art get this for free. Pokémon benefited a lot from being a black-and-white Game Boy game. Even modern Pokémon games have a very abstracted art style. Similarly, Minecraft does an excellent job evoking a mysterious world while letting your imagination fill in the gaps, both in the art style and in the game mechanics. Sidebar, here's an informative exercise that I recommend you try at home. Don't look too low on this slide, by the way, or you'll find spoilers for the rest of the talk. Go over each bullet point I cover and ask yourself, what did Minecraft do here? Almost every case, Minecraft addresses in an effective and innovative way. Minecraft and Pokémon also bring us to the elephant in the room. If you really want to evoke a sense of mystery in your games, make games for children. It's not a coincidence that the anecdotes I opened with were all from my childhood. In the same way that teenagers are physiologically more capable of love and of pouring their whole lives into esoteric hobbies, children are physiologically more capable of wonder and awe. If you ever feel like today's games have gotten stale and uninteresting, talk to your niece about Minecraft sometime. Ask her about Herobrine. Or read up on Herobrine first, just in case she doesn't know, and you get to be the one to tell her the legend. These are the far lands. This is what happens to the Minecraft level generator at distances where 32-bit floats can no longer precisely store the coordinates involved. How cool is that? You've traveled so far from home that the rules of reality themselves start to break down. Glitches like this open the door just a crack, giving you a glimpse into the inner workings of the universe. The Minus World in Super Mario Bros. Is another good example of the glitch like this, especially if you play the Famicom version of the game. Similarly, Metroid has some very weird levels that you can explore by using glitches that warp you through walls. Mole Monster, released in 2003, is a stealth horror game. I played this game only once, but I still remember one moment vividly. During a tense chase scene, right as the monster was about to maybe catch me, or maybe not, the game started to stutter. It jumped back several frames in the simulation prior and repeated them. The stutter threw an already tense situation into confusion, and drew it out temporally, building drama. Was the game glitching out, or was that a feature? I may never find out. I haven't played that game in 10 years. But that moment has stuck in my head. So am I saying you should deliberately ship your game with glitches? Maybe? Probably not. But glitches provide an enormous advantage in that when the player perceives a glitch, all her genre savvy goes right out the window. Players know nowadays that you're always going to be fair, every path always leads to a reward, and you won't put them in a fight if they don't have a weapon yet. But if glitches are involved, all bets are off. I'm putting this idea last because it feels a little bit like violating the Geneva Convention, but it shows you how far you can go if you want to really cram mystery down the throats of people who are intent on spoiling it for themselves. One of the things I liked about Fez is that the map is so topologically confusing, it made strategy guides very difficult to write. I don't know if this was a deliberate aspect of the design or just a happy side effect, but it's basically impossible to depict the map intuitively in 2 dimensions. The lesson here is that you can design puzzles that are logistically difficult to spoil. You can do this via randomization, roguelikes are effectively impossible to spoil, or by as simple a trick as using glyphs rather than words. If you don't know what this symbol is called, it's pretty hard to search the internet to figure out what it means. So, to sum up, make players ask questions. Don't answer every question, be abstract. Trust players to look for the answers, exclusion is a strength. Find an advocate so you don't need to trust players. Make some puzzles only solvable by the community as a whole. Make use of the false ceiling. Take advantage of glitches if you can get away with it. Make your solutions hard to discuss if you can get away with it. Finally, and most importantly, make games for children. Thank you. I'll field questions in the comments.